Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Classroom, where we unpack the different pathways to career success. We're your hosts, Adam and James, and today's topic is one many people wrestle with. Should I pursue short-term training program or go the traditional college route?
So with rising costs, changing job market, people are rethinking what they need out of education. What does it look like for them? LCCC offers both options. We're joined today by Tonya Hacker, Dean of Outreach and Workforce Development, to go over some of the pros and cons of each kind of education to help us decide, well, what's right for me. Right? So, what's the key difference between short-term training and traditional degrees?
Well, the main difference truly is the amount of time you're going to commit to the training program. Key short-term training programs tend to be more consolidated, so you're training for longer periods of time during the day. So let's say it's a 9-week boot camp in manufacturing, for example, which we do offer here. Those 9 weeks are full. I mean, it's a full-time 9-week training program. So every day, Monday through Thursday, you are going to be training basically all day for 9 weeks straight. But then by the end of that 9-week program, you are ready to enter the workforce. So versus a traditional degree, and let's just use an associate's degree as an example, you're typically going to commit to about 2 years to get that traditional degree. And your courses are going to be kind of spread throughout the week depending on the program you choose and depending on the structure of that program. So you could take a class that meets, 3 nights a week for an hour or 2 mornings a week for an hour and a half, just depending on what you do. And if you stack a few of those classes together, you may have classes sprinkled throughout your week for 3 or 4 hours a day over the course of 2 years. So I think that's the biggest difference. Now and I know we're going to talk about later, but there's different reasons why people would choose a short-term training versus a traditional degree. But the biggest difference truly is the time commitment.
So who tends to benefit most from short-term training?
People who want to go right to work, who don't want to commit to the length of time it takes to complete a full degree. So with the short-term training, you may not end up with a degree per se, but all of our training programs will provide you with an industry-relevant credential. So, for example, the 9-week boot camp that I mentioned in the last question for manufacturing, you would end that with a series of industry-relevant credentials that you can take to an employer and say, "Hey, I've earned this credential in safety. I've earned this credential in precision machining, and I've earned this credential in operating a CNC machine." So those things are going to help. So back to the original question, because I kind of got off on a rabbit trail there, but I think somebody who really needs to get in and out of a training program and get right to work into a job that's going to be good paying, but not necessarily willing to commit, a full 2 years of their time to receiving that degree.
So our listeners know that we offer a lot of different programs. What are some of the most popular?
Well, and I'm not just saying this to impress you, James, but I think CDL is a very popular program. And I will say, I mean, one of the reasons it is so popular is because there are lots of jobs and the jobs are good jobs. The jobs are great paying jobs. What are some of the pay rates that you're seeing from employers out there right now?
So we're seeing anywhere from mid 50,000s. Those tend to be local jobs that are home and aren't requiring a lot of extra effort. And then some of the CDL jobs are running up into the low six figures. 130,000 is a number that we're starting to see on a pretty regular basis. Now, you are out several days at a time for most of those jobs, but there are instances where that $130,000 pay rate is coming and you're home Saturdays and Sundays. So it's not a bad job. You may not be home in your bed every single night, but you're well compensated for the inconvenience of not having your own pillows and covers and somebody next to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I might be thinking about getting my CDL soon. I think you've got me convinced. So that's a really, really popular one. And we'll talk more about it here in a few minutes. But again, a very short term commitment in terms of the length of time that you would have to train to get a really, really good career, really good job. Another example is certified clinical medical assistant. That is another job that is in very high demand within our healthcare industry in Southeast Wyoming. And so you're able to, I think we have very close to 100% placement rate in that program, meaning that students who take that training are able to get jobs right away. And those are also, you know, very good paying jobs. And there are opportunities, to stack onto that credential for people to go on and do other things in the healthcare industry after. So those programs tend to fill up. We tend to have waiting lists of people wanting to get into those programs. Are very, very popular. Another one is the one I just mentioned earlier, which is manufacturing. We have quite a few manufacturing companies moving into Southeast Wyoming, and so more and more jobs available in advanced manufacturing. And manufacturing is not what people think it is. Some people think back to, the days when people stood at conveyor belts and assembly lines and it was dirty and unsafe, and they think factories and kind of that is that is not what manufacturing is today. When we talk about advanced manufacturing, we are talking about very high tech, very precision oriented careers that require very advanced technical knowledge. And it's just amazing what these guys and gals can build when they get out into the workplace. They're making things that would just there are mind blowing. It's amazing. So I think once people realize what manufacturing is and what they can do and the great jobs they can get as machining technicians or CNC operators out there, they're wanting to go through these programs. So that's another very popular one.
What a bummer. I was looking forward to standing there and just putting taillights on a car.
They have machines to do that now.
Darn it.
So, so Tanya, you've talked about quite a few of our training programs. How quickly can someone complete a short-term program and start working?
Fairly quickly. So it's not going to necessarily be a matter of days. It'll be a matter of weeks, but within a matter of weeks. So when we talked about CDL is about a 4 to 6 week commitment, whether you do choose to do our day program or our night program. And James can talk more about that. But when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, that is a very short time to develop a very specific skill that's going to get you a great job in the transportation industry. So that's an example. Our manufacturing boot camps, which I mentioned before, are 9 weeks long. We have some programs within our healthcare training programs and things that are closer to 12 weeks long. And we have others that are a full year long. But typically, we don't, in outreach and workforce development and the short term training programs, we do not follow the typical schedule that you would see in a traditional degree program. So we don't run a 16-week semester for the most part. We don't run, year long or 2 year long programs. They are a series of weeks and they might run from July to, October, just depending on when we get those scheduled. But I don't want to say that we don't offer any credit programs within outreach and workforce development, because we do. There's also an opportunity that if you were to go through a short-term program and then you choose later on to go into a degree program, you could earn credit for prior learning, meaning that you could potentially get credit for those short-term training programs that you took that were offered not for credit that could apply towards your degree program later on. But typically, I would say anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks on average is what we'd be looking at.
So we've listed a lot of the different jobs you can get out of some of these programs. Are they just stepping stones, or am I actually setting myself up for a career pathway by going through these programs?
I think I can say both. There's nothing wrong with something being a stepping stone. If you have a longer term plan and you say, "Hey, I want to get my CNA, let's say for example, my certified nursing assistant credential with the plan later on to become a nurse, but I want to go to work first and see maybe what is the nursing field all about? I want to save up money. I want whatever it is you want to do. You can go get your CNA and go right to work and then plan to come back later on. So it's okay to have a short-term training program be part of your longer-term plan and be kind of a stepping stone. But I want to make it very clear that most of our programs are full career pathways and are designed to get you into a good job that could be a lifetime career sort of situation. So with the emphasis that we all have to embrace the fact that we're going to be lifelong learners, right? So there's no program I think that really even exists now that is going to give you all the knowledge you need for the course of your entire career for the rest of your life. You are going to have to commit to knowing that you're going to have to come back and continue your education with different trainings, conferences, skill building opportunities throughout your career. But these training programs that we offer that we're talking about right now, which are really to get you the basic skills you need to get into the workforce, those are designed to get you started and get you the skills you need to land that first job.
James, I know you talked earlier about, the difference, 50 to $130,000 for CDL. What are the comparisons financially between a traditional path and a short-term path?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
I know it
Oh
is.
dear. I'm going to get myself into trouble here. Well, I think you need to think about this in terms of return on investment. I really do. So we're not it's more complex than just looking at, well, what's my starting wage out of an 8-week training program versus a 2-year degree program versus a 4-year degree program and on up. You have to keep in mind that you are potentially investing your own money into this training. So looking at the cost, you also need to be thinking about like what is your long-term goal, right? So if your long-term goal is to become a physician, let's say for example, then the short-term training route is probably not for you, but you're going to have a very significant financial investment into your education. You're also going to have a very significant investment of time, and you need to think about that's time you're potentially not working or not working full time for some people. I worked full time when I was getting my degrees, so I mean, but I wasn't working jobs that paid very much. I was working food service types of jobs and things like that. So you're losing that income that you could be working. You could be earning working a full time decent job. So it's just a very very complicated question to answer. But what I would encourage anyone to do if you're looking at like, what am I going to get paid if if I'm going to get a CDL versus what would I get paid if I went into a business management bachelor's degree program? I would consider looking at your goals, your values, and the return on investments. Look at how much each program is going to cost you and then what the opportunities are to bring you a return when you start earning an income later on and see what those are. I think there's benefits and drawbacks to both, and there's not one option that's necessarily better than the other. It really depends on what somebody wants. I will also say that with a caveat though, a lot of our industry partners are coming to us asking for more short-term training programs because they are wanting to get people in quicker and then invest in those people to be able to provide continuing education while they are working. So that is a trend that we're seeing that's growing and growing and growing slowly. So we'll see more and more of that moving forward. Does that answer your question? Not
Yeah,
awkwardly,
yeah.
but okay, good.
So you mentioned we're getting feedback from some of our industry partners. For the last 40 plus years, we have told pretty much every student, go to college.
Yeah.
If you want a good job, you go to college.
Yeah.
How do employers view this short-term training?
Yeah, well, I think again, it just depends on the employer. It really depends on the industry, right? So some of our professional industries that we think about, like for example, the legal industry, if they want somebody who's going to come be a litigator for them, they want somebody who has that law degree. Bottom line, you just have to. And the industry is aligned on that all the way through. If they want someone to come in and be a legal aid, or a paralegal or something along those lines, that's a very, very, very different educational career path. And they wouldn't necessarily be looking for somebody with 6 years of education background. So I think that's where it's really important to know that there's always going to be those industry partners that do value that longer term commitment. But I think the trend that we're seeing more and more from some of our larger industries is a push towards work-based learning, so more apprenticeships and things where you earn while you learn, which is good for both the employer and the person doing the training. And also, again, like I mentioned before, a push to more of the short-term training. And we're seeing these in a lot of the more technical, trades-oriented fields. We're seeing it in IT, cybersecurity, a lot of the trades and those kinds of things. So again, it really does depend. There's value in short and long-term training, and it depends on the perspective of the employer partner that we're talking to.
So you've touched on it already, but can someone blend both approaches, start short term and later pursue a degree in most of the short term trainings we offer?
Absolutely. 100% they can. And honestly, I think that's something that we support here is we really encourage people to look at the longer term pathway for their, field that they're going into and what are the opportunities beyond that initial credential that they earn with us. So, someone who does have aspirations to move up and become a manager or, high level executive within a company, but they start with a short-term training credential, let's say in fiber optics as a technician, and they're going to go out and they're going to pay their dues and they're going to work boots on the ground as a technician, learn the industry with the thought that they want to eventually work their way up within their company to become an executive. They can start out with a optics credential, a very short-term training that's going to get them into that field and get them a good job. And then they can come back and build onto that with a business degree or something along those lines. And I think that's great to have the that kind of plan in place. And I mentioned before the credit for prior learning, and that is something that more and more colleges are moving toward, and something we do here at LCCC, which really places a lot of value on the training and experience that a person receives before they decide to pursue that degree. So hopefully that kind of answers your question there.
So deciding on which path is right is a very personal choice. What advice would you give to somebody who's trying to decide whether short term is correct or long term, a traditional degree, non traditional? What's your advice to someone trying to make that decision for themselves?
Yep. I would say, you really need to kind of look at what your own situation is, your own personal values, and what your needs are right now. So, kind of goes back to our earlier questions about the for someone who really wants to get right to work or really needs to get right to work to support family members or to, whatever the situation may be, the short-term training program might really be the best option for you. And that may be the way to go. Someone who has the flexibility and the availability to be able to commit to a longer term training program, that could be the route for you. I would encourage people to really, really invest some time into, again, back to that return on investment. Look at the employment projections for your industry. Look at the return on your investment and the potential for careers coming out of that program, whether it's a degree program or a training program. Talk to people who work in that field. Talk to industry leaders and find out what they're looking for in terms of an educational background. Those are all things to really kind of think about before you make that decision. So it's never going to be just an easy, quick decision, and shouldn't be, because I think that's where we see some people get stuck in a, oops, I made the wrong decision and now I don't like this choice that I've made for myself. I can say that I got my bachelor's degree in a social science because simply because I made the decision based on the fact that I really liked some of my classes, but I didn't do any research into what I could do with that degree, nothing. And so what I found myself I found myself in a situation at the end where I had this degree, but I couldn't do anything with it. So I had to go on and earn some sort of advanced degree so that I could actually go to work and do something with that degree that would be meaningful and be something that would be good for me. So don't make the same mistake I did.
Well, thanks for joining us for today's episode of Beyond the Classroom. The truth is, there's no one-size-fits-all path. Whether you choose short-term training or a degree program, it depends on your career goals, timeline, and life circumstances. LCCC is here to help you make that decision and support you no matter which road you take.
Visit lccc.wy.edu/workforce to learn more or talk to an advisor to understand what options are available to you. Don't forget to listen to this and future episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Castbox, and Amazon Music. And until next time, remember, your path is yours to build.
I want tomorrow. I want tomorrow. I want tomorrow. I want tomorrow today.